History has some sad stories. The powerful emotions that can exist in a simple piece of paper will leave you speechless. If you thought you've had it tough lately, take a look at these heart-wrenching documents and maybe you'll feel better. Get your tissues ready. Alton Miller's 1918 pandemic letter. Alton Miller was a driver in the Army in Kentucky during the great influenza pandemic of 1918. A collection of his letters has survived. He wrote to his father on October 5th saying, "Don't get frightened, but I have had the influenza for 4 days." To his sister he wrote, "There are nearly 10,000 cases down here and 22 deaths were added today. I'm very glad I did not report it and go to the hospital. They say you are lucky if you get out alive once you get in." Soon after those letters, the local chaplain writes to his parents saying, "I'm sitting by the bed of your son who is ill with pneumonia. He is quite sick and you've probably been informed by wire of his condition. Hope is not all gone. He seems to have lost his nerve. It will be well if you can come." Finally, on October 11th, a telegram is sent saying, "Your son, Alton Miller, died at base hospital at 1 o'clock today. Wire me if you want remains shipped at government expense and to whom remains will be consigned." Alton Miller was posthumously awarded this medal in recognition of his sacrifice during World War I. Boarding pass for the Titanic. 14th of April 1912. It was Anna Sjoblom's 18th birthday. The Finnish teenager was travelling in third class aboard the Titanic on her way to New York. In the early hours of the morning, the ship was struck by an iceberg and sank off the coast of Canada in the freezing North Atlantic Ocean, taking more than 1,500 people with it. Anna survived, as did her boarding pass. It sold at auction in 1999 for $100,000. Anna lived a long life and died in 1975. Fawkes Confession. London, 1605. In 1605, Fawkes conspired to kill King James I and his lords by blowing up the Houses of Parliament. The authorities received a tip-off and Fawkes was caught red-handed. He was tortured for several days in the Tower of London before confessing. This document is part of his confession. His signature below is after his torture, while the one above was made before, suggesting the suffering that he endured. Fawkes and his 7 conspirators were all executed. Londoners were then encouraged to mark the anniversary by lighting bonfires to celebrate the king's escape, and the tradition has survived for 400 years. Roosevelt Diary. On Valentine's Day 1884, Theodore Roosevelt's 22-year-old wife had just given birth and he was a proud father. His joy was not to last when he was called home urgently. When he arrived at his front door, he was greeted by his brother with the words, "There is a curse on this house." Upstairs he found his wife dying of kidney disease, which was masked by the pregnancy, and downstairs his mother had a life-threatening fever caused by typhoid. Both his mother and wife died within hours of one another. His diary entry that day ends with the simple but heartbreaking entry, "The light has gone out of my life." The Fraterville Coal Mine Letters. On May 19, 1902, an explosion at the Frederickville coal mine in Tennessee killed 216 miners. 26 miners survived the blast, but were trapped in an airtight part of the cave. As they became aware of their fate, several of the miners wrote letters to their loved ones. All 26 eventually succumbed to a lack of oxygen. One miner, Jacob L. Vowell, whose 14-year-old son Elbert was a miner and with him at the time, wrote this to his wife. "Ellen, darling, goodbye for us both. Elbert said the Lord had saved him. Do the best you can with the children. We're all praying for air to support us, but it is getting so bad without any air. Horace, Elbert said for you to wear his shoes and clothing. Ellen, I want you to live right and come to heaven. Raise the children the best you can. Oh, how I wish to be with you. Goodbye, all of you. Goodbye. Bury me and Elbert in the same grave by little Eddie. There is a few of us alive yet. Oh God, for one more breath. Ellen, remember me as long as you live. Goodbye, darlings." Brookes slave ship. The Brookes was a British slave ship that was launched in 1781. She made 11 slave trading journeys between Africa and America before being condemned as unseaworthy in 1804. To highlight the plight of the slaves, an engraving was published showing the conditions on board. It became an iconic depiction of the cruelty of the slave trade. It shows how slave traders managed to get 487 slaves on board for the journey from West Africa to America. Each person was allocated a space 6 foot by 1.5 foot. The document is not an exact description of the ship. The Brookes actually transported many more slaves per journey. Up to 744 per journey were taken across the Atlantic and sold. The Treaty of Fort Laramie. The Treaty of Fort Laramie is a peace treaty from 1868 between the United States and the Lakota and Arapaho Native American tribes. It effectively ended Red Cloud's War and established the Great Sioux Reservation for the Native American tribes. However, the peace did not last long. Gold was discovered in the Black Hills, and predictably the government decided it wanted the land back. After the US unilaterally annexed the land, it also failed to stop white settlers from moving onto tribal lands. The Great Sioux War broke out soon after. Over 100 years later, in 1980, the US Supreme Court found in favor of the Native Americans and ordered the government to pay reparations of $120 million. The Sioux refused the money, saying they wanted the land back, and they are now owed over $1 billion by the government. Anne Frank's last diary entry. Anne Frank, the teenage Jewish diarist, has become a symbol of young courage since she hid from the Nazis for 2 years during World War II. Her diary from the time in the secret annex of their house in Amsterdam has become one of the most famous accounts of life in wartime. She was eventually captured by the Nazis and sadly died in a concentration camp a few weeks before the war ended. Her last diary entry before she was captured reads, "I'm split in two. One side contains my exuberant cheerfulness, my flippancy, my joy in life. The other one is much purer, deeper, and finer. No one knows Anne's better side, and that's why most people can't stand me. If only there were no other people in the world." Schindler's List. Oskar Schindler was a member of the Nazi Party in Germany in 1945. At the height of Hitler's madness, while thousands of Jews were being deported to concentration camps, Schindler, managed to rescue more than 1,000 men, women and children and transport them to safety. Their names were documented on this list. The list itself was recently put up for auction for $3 million. It didn't sell. Samuel Cabell letter. Our final document is possibly a bit happier. Samuel Cabell was a 21-year-old private in the 55th Massachusetts Infantry. Before he joined the Army, he was a slave in Missouri in the southern United States. He writes to his wife, "Dear wife, I've enlisted in the Army. I'm now in the state of Massachusetts. I look forward to a brighter day when I shall have the opportunity of seeing you in the full enjoyment of freedom. Great is the outpouring of the colored people that is now rallying with the hearts of lions. We shall meet again, and oh, what a happy time that will be. I shall use my utmost endeavor to strike at the rebellion and the heart of this system that so long has kept us in chains. I remain your own affectionate husband until death, Samuel Cabell." Samuel Cabell returned to Missouri for his wife after the war, and together they moved to Denver, Colorado. He died in 1905.